Good morning. This is Rich Sierra, President of Florida Small Business Legal Center. This is the Business SOS podcast. Thank you for listening today. Today we're going to talk about I want to buy a business. What should I do? But before I go into that topic, I'd like to invite you to participate in the show. If you send me your legal question, whatever question you might have regarding your small business, send it to rich@richsierra.com. And if I select your question, I'll discuss it here in the show in one of the episodes. Make sure you give me your address, and I'll send you a copy of Business SOS, 8 Common Legal Mistakes Business Owners Make and How to Avoid Them. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and you can ask for your local bookstore. It is a great reference guide for business owners. Many of my clients tell me that they keep it next to their desk. I'm very flattered by that. But it's also give you topics. Every chapter is independently written, so you can read a chapter by itself. If by any chance you're looking to have a lease agreement at some point, there's a chapter on leases. There's a chapter on contracts. There's a chapter on lawsuits as well. So whether you're considering to initiate a lawsuit, or perhaps you receive a demand letter and a lawsuit has been threatened against you, there's a chapter that addresses that and what to recognize, what to do, but at the very least, what not to do, which I think is more important, because sometimes with good intentions, people overreact when they receive a threat of illegal action, and they make mistakes along the way because it's a normal reaction to react to something where we're threatened. But this book will give you that insight, and it is really conversation as if I'm talking to you if you're in front of me in my office. So the Business SOS, 8 Common Legal Mistakes Business Owners Make and How to Avoid Them. Highly recommend it, obviously. I wrote it. But I wrote it for business owners. I can only reach so many people when I do the consultations. This was an opportunity to perhaps reach a wider audience. And if I help you avoid one of the mistakes, I've done what I set out to accomplish. So I want to buy a business. What should I do? In my practice, we do quite a bit of buy-sell agreements, and I've done a few hundred of business transactions, whether somebody's buying a business, somebody's selling a business, in my 18 years of practice. So today I want to talk about you're interested in buying a business. And it goes like this. Some people come to my office and say, you know what, I found a business I'm interested in buying. I need help with the paperwork. And that's kind of the normal course of action. And I said, well, let's talk about this business first of all. So one of the questions that I have, and I'll give, then I'll go into specific examples, is that why is the seller selling the business? And it is important to know that. Whether it's they want to retire, whether there was a change in circumstances in the seller, that it was time to sell that business, sometimes because of a divorce. And we had a few weeks ago, my friend and colleague Angela Neve here talking about the impact of divorce on a business. And so it could be a number of reasons. But understanding why the seller wants to sell the business, simply just to have an insight on that in that discussion. So I asked the question, how far have you gotten in the process? Whether you have signed any paperwork, have you put a deposit? And a lot of times they have actually placed a deposit and signed some documents. And I said, well, send me the documents and let's take a look at what you signed, and then we can take it from there. And on other times, say, no, we have some preliminary discussions. We have not signed anything. We have not placed a deposit towards a sale. And that's actually the best time to contact an attorney, that if you're considering buying a business, don't sign anything, don't put a deposit without consulting an attorney first. I think it is very important. There are a lot of times there are business brokers involved. And let me talk about that. Uh, Business broker similar to like a real estate broker, that they're trying to basically, they have listings, but they focus primarily on selling businesses. Their clients are usually the seller that is trying to sell the business, but sometimes it's the buyer who engages the services of a business broker who will basically try to look for businesses for the buyer to buy. And I think at some point I'll bring a business broker as a guest to talk about the process of buying or selling a business from their perspective, to share that with you. The Many times I see business broker contracts that they're basically standard contracts that are already pre-made. They have all the legal jargon, for the lack of a better word, establishing the obligations of the parties, but also what happens, it really protects primarily the broker. And I mean no disrespect to the business brokers, do a great job. Many of them are friends of mine. But at the same time, once you have that contract, the business broker there is interested in making that deal happen. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have any bad intentions. They have very good intentions, but they're not there to protect you as the buyer. They're there to make the deal happen, but it is your responsibility to make sure that you do your proper due diligence and investigation with the proper professionals in order to protect your best interest. And in fact, in many of these, and pretty much all of the ones that I've seen, the contracts, the asset purchase agreements that are drafted or are prepared for by business brokers, companies, they specifically state that they're not here to provide you legal advice. They're not here to provide you financial advice, that you have had the opportunity to review this contract with the proper professional legal counsel or a financial advisor or accountant, and you understand each and every provision. In an ideal world, you read every single line on that contract, but that's not the real world. The reality is many buyers look at the contracts, they go out and sign it, they put a deposit, and then they want to say, I need your help in finalizing the deal. Then I have to basically look at what they signed, what my client, in this particular case, the buyer signed, in order to work within those parameters, because not at that point the contract is binding. So I'll take a look at the contract, and the first thing I look at, how much time, first of all, how much do you know about this business? No, I just wanted to buy a business, and this is very common. People that are about close to retiring or they're looking for, in that middle-aged group, looking for something different, and they have some money in the 401k, and they want to invest in a business to basically help to do something after retirement and perhaps pass it on to their children. And that is fine. But one thing that I want to find out is, like, do you know anything about this business? Is this something that you have done in the past? Or is this something that you like to learn about? And if they don't have anything to do with the business they're buying, that is a little bit of a red flag for me, and a word of caution, simply because there's a learning curve in anything you do. You're not going to do it right the first time. So if you're about to invest in a business, you're about to take out your life savings and invest it in buying into a business that is an ongoing concern, a business that is operating, and you do not know anything about that business, you never ran that business before, then you need to bring somebody in that will stay. Either you hire that person in to be a key employee or perhaps a minority shareholder of the company to help you run that business, or you have to have assurances that whoever is running that business is going to stay there, which brings me to the second point. So if you do not know anything about the business, and I used a lot of analogies that I used to do with restaurants. People can relate to them. People understand them. We all go out to eat. So let's continue using that restaurant example. And this actually has happened, that people want to go into the restaurant business. They do not know anything about it. They like the food. They just happen to eat there. And they say, the owner told me it's for sale. We want to buy it. Okay. So you don't know anything about restaurant business. You never worked in it. You want to buy the business? Fine. Who's going to run it? Well, the owner said the manager is going to stay to work for us. Okay. What guarantees do we have that's going to happen? Is there going to be any type of contract with that particular manager that will stay there for a period of time that you feel comfortable that you can run that business yourself without that manager? So there are no guarantees that person is going to stay. Or the owner will say, I'll stay for as long as you need me. Then when you feel comfortable, I'll leave. And these agreements, these loose agreements do happen. This is not, I'm not giving you a theory, I'm giving you real life, real world scenarios that at some point, after everything's said and done, they end up going back to my office because somebody breached the contract. And if you have listened to some of my prior episodes, there's a theme here that most of business disputes stem from a breach of contract. And when the contracts have loose terms or terms that are really clearly defined, it creates that ambiguity that is so easy to fall into a situation that the contract has been breached. So going forward, I said, okay, so how much time do you have to do for due diligence? Due diligence, let me backtrack a second. It's the process of investigating this business. It's the process of going through the financials, the proper process going through the employee records. You basically investigate every aspect of that business in order to determine whether or not the representations that are made to you, how much money as to how much money the business is making are true or close to true. And this is an important point. When you look at the data sheet of a business that is for sale, it's going to basically have the best positive light. There's nothing misleading. I'm not saying that anything misleading about that, but we'll have the best positive light because they're trying to sell the business. It's not going to give you anything negative for the most part. It is no different than you go to Realtor.com, you go to Zillow, you're looking for homes for sale. I mean, it's going to tell you the best things of those houses, 3-bedroom home, cul-de-sac, water, so beautiful neighborhood. It's going to give you the best positive light. But it also tells you, if you look at the disclaimer in most of these listings that you have for businesses, tell you do not rely upon these representations. These are simply an illustration. It is your responsibility to do your own due diligence, which is true. So the due diligence investigation should be done by professionals. Sometimes I have clients that say, well, I got their tax returns, I got 3 months of bank statements, and we're ready to close next week. And I said, okay, let's slow down. So you want to buy this restaurant for $300,000 cash, and you're going to basically do it on the basis of a few tax returns and the 3 months bank statements. That is just not enough. Due diligence, and then I look at the contract said the due diligence is 15 days. With all due respect to my business broker friends, that's just not enough time to do due diligence on a business. You need at least 30 days. And I'll tell you why you need the 30 days. Unless you're buying the business and you ran it yourself, you say you're a working manager for that business, you've known it for a number of years, you know the books, you know the records, you were the one paying the bills, the customers, the traffic, everything happening in that business, then you're already familiar with it. The due diligence clearly can be shortened simply because you're part of it. Or you're a partner, buying your other partner out, your other partner is retiring, and you know everything about the business. So in that particular case, you really don't need that much due diligence because you're part of the business, you know it. But for the most part, when you are buying a business, you don't know anything about it. And unlike the real estate contracts in Florida for residential properties, there's specific guidelines and there's specific what we call the Florida Bar approved contract that is very standard and is very detailed. In the case of a business contract to purchase a business, there's really no standard contract. It could be a one-page agreement that I've seen them, and it could be a 30-page agreement that I've seen them as well. So there's really no guidelines as to that. Some of us that have been doing this for a while use similar contracts that have similar provisions, but really no asset purchase agreement will be the same. So that is very important to know that. So what is due diligence? At the outset, I asked, what type of documents have you received from the seller for you to review? And also find out how long the business has been around. So the business has been around for, say, 10 years. You really don't need 10 years worth of information, but you need about 3 to 5, depends. At the very least, you start with 5, and then you can narrow it down to 3. Then you basically get that last year and then the last 6 months, depending on the analysis that you want to make. But at the outset, I like to have 3 years worth of tax returns, both federal tax returns and state tax returns. In the case of payroll taxes that are paid to the state, all those reports have to be provided at the outset. They should have them available. If somebody is basically saying, the seller's telling me that the last year's tax returns are an extension, so they don't have them ready. That is a red flag for me, because if you're about to sell your business, it should be ready for sale. You should not have to wait for information to give to a prospective buyer, because that's what we analyze, whether or not the information that you're providing to us is accurate and whether the price that you are offering to sell your business, it is a fair price for the buyer to buy. And that's a different conversation about what is a business is worth. But let's say, for example, so we ask for at least 3 years of federal tax returns. We ask for 3 years of payroll tax returns. We ask for 3 years of the state unemployment tax returns. We ask for copies of all their insurance policies. This is a start. I ask for a list of the employees and also who do they have working as independent contractors. And this is very important because if the business has people working as independent contractors, I need to know that and know, is there an independent contractor agreement with this individual? Or is this individual being paid as an independent contractor, but the individual is actually an employee? That is important to know because that can bring other considerations as to why some people are getting paid differently, as to treated differently, as to who's an employee, who's an independent contractor, when that person should have been an actual employee, him or herself. And I want to know whether everybody working in this business, who's going to stay, who's going to leave. Because there's a knowledge base that will leave. Well, basically it stays with the business, and then if everybody leaves, you're left with an empty business. So I need to know that. What is going to happen with these employees, who may stay, who's going to leave. I like to know, and this is something that we actually do on our own. Once I know the entity, we'll do our own research and find out whether they have any lawsuits that have been filed against them, any pending litigation. They need to disclose that, but we can find out about it ourselves. Whether they have any liens, whether any type of UCC ones. That's the Florida registry. So whether anything has been filed against them, and they have any outstanding loans. Lease agreements. How is the lease going to be handled? Many times I ask my clients, tell me, no, he's gonna sign the lease to me. But how long do you have in the lease? So, well, they have another 3 years. I said, okay. Have you read the lease? No. He won't do it until I give him a deposit. I said, okay. So if the business is going to be in a place that you have to rent, you have to lease, you have to be given the lease. But let's go fast forward. The letter of intent has been signed, and then we're in the due diligence process for the sake of this conversation. So I'll explain to the client, listen, he cannot assign the lease to you. Pretty much most lease agreements requires the landlord's consent to assign the lease. And this is very important for you to know. If somebody's telling you, I can assign my lease to you, just please remember that the landlord's consent, for the most part, is always required. I had a case a few years ago where somebody bought a business. It was a beauty shop. And they spent a ton of money buying it. They got in. The owner did an assignment, quote unquote, to my client. And when she went to get her business license at the city, they asked her for the lease. And she said, well, I have this assignment. She said, no, that's not going to work. You need something from the landlord telling you that, yes, that lease has been assigned to you. Otherwise, you cannot get a business license. But I thought this is what I needed. No, this is not going to work. So my client was operating in this business illegally because she took the business over. She was already, taking care of clients, but she basically was trespassing in private property because the landlord never agreed to transfer that lease. That lease was on the prior, under the seller's name. So you have to basically understand that in order for you to have a lease assigned to you, the landlord should have consent. So let's go ahead and just fast forward. I just wanted to make that point to you simply because, I've seen situations that people get into to try to avoid seeking legal advice, whether it's by fear of what the answer will be, whether it's by trying to save some money in their consultation or save some money in legal services. They decide to do it on their own. They decide to do kind of the informal, handshake deal with very rudimentary, even handwritten documents, and transfer $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in this level of informality. Then you find out that particular contract was voidable. Well, you're already out 50, 60 grand. And then you come to my office and I said, okay, clearly this is a problem. You were sold an illegal contract. You cannot enforce this contract. You cannot enforce this lease. You cannot operate this business. So we can go ahead and file the lawsuit. But that will require additional resources from the client to try to enforce the contract. So, and we talked about this in prior episodes about the cost of litigation, and I will do another episode on this about, and I'll basically go to actually give you examples of a breakdown of what a typical litigation could cost and how it can escalate faster. Unfortunately, this client would have to spend $15,000, $20,000 to try to get everything reversed back, and the client unfortunately did not have those resources. So we ended up getting it resolved, but unfortunately was not the results that the client expected, not because she did not have a good case. It's because you have to put additional resources to enforce your rights under a contract or under a fraudulent contract in this particular case, which was fraud. But that could have been avoided if the client would have sought legal advice prior to entering into the transaction. Because if people knew each other, they feel comfortable, they made the informal agreement. Informal agreements lead to litigation. Informal agreements lead to problems. So I just want to, digress and make that particular point simply because I've seen too many clients that come to my office after the fact when they sign documents that they should not have signed. And we do our best to try to put it together. We do our best to try to fix the problem. But some problems you can only fix to a certain degree once they're done. So what other information would I seek in due diligence? I ask my clients, okay, so who's going to run the business? Say you buy it. Who's going to run the business? And you're probably asking, why are you asking this question? Because all you basically need to do is some paperwork. Anybody can do paperwork, okay? But it is important to understand, why are you buying a business? And if you're not going to, it's not just putting the financial resources into the business, but you got to put your energy, your time, and your effort, and your commitment into running that business. Okay, once you pay that money, it is yours. And if you're not willing to put the time and effort that requires, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I'll just give you an example. It just happened a few weeks ago. So had a prospective client wanted me to review a franchise disclosure document. And at some point, I'm going to do an episode on franchises. For a pizza franchise out of state, they're looking to come to Florida. That's okay. I'll review it and I'll do a consultation. I reviewed the franchise disclosure document, the FDD. And it was fine. I mean, it's actually a very good document that disclosures that they made. In fact, this particular one made more disclosures than most of the ones that I've seen. It talked about the average price per ticket on this particular restaurant franchise. They also talked about the average cost of food relative to the revenue on the average store. So, and there was actually no turnover. Got a lot of turnover in terms of the franchisee. So that seemed good. I looked for those items as well. And but one of the things that I guess my pet peeve with some franchises is that they require a deposit or franchise fee before selecting a location, and it's non-refundable. So that is a problem because you basically, at that particular point, the moment you put a franchise fee in, you're forced to find a location. And sometimes those things are negotiated, some things are not, but it's basically the way they work, and that is fine. Okay? Fortunately, my client at that particular point had not put any money into the franchise. He simply was looking into it. So I asked the question, I said, why do you want to buy this franchise? What is your interest? Have you done this before? Are you involved in restaurants. I said, no, I'm about to graduate from nursing school. I said, okay, this is interesting. Um, so, and he's about to take the NCLEX in a few months. And I said, well, you graduate from nursing school. You're about to take the NCLEX. Are you planning to leave the nursing profession and go into owning your own pizza franchise? There's nothing wrong with that decision. I just needed to know, have an understanding, especially as I used to be a healthcare recruiter, and I understand, and I used to work for hospitals, so I understand the demands that the healthcare professionals endure, especially when they begin their careers. So he said, no, what I'm planning to do is I'm going to have somebody run it for me. I said, fine. I mean, you have somebody working and running a business for you. That's a way to increase wealth. Nothing wrong with that. And I said, does this person have the experience of running a pizza franchise or a pizza restaurant? He said, no. I said, okay. Do you know anybody who has ran a pizza restaurant before? I said, no. I said, okay. So what I told him, I said, listen, I know and I have clients that own pizza restaurants, very successful ones, and that is going to be your life for at least 5 years. And if you want to do that, that is fine. There's nothing wrong with making that commitment, but that's going to be your life. You're not going to be able to take your NCLEX, start your career as a nurse, and then also be successful as a restaurant owner. There's just not enough hours in the day to do that successfully at the same time. But it is your decision what course of action you want to make. And you also have to understand that, yes, although the franchise gives you training, that training will only take you so far if you do not know, if you don't have the experience that when things go wrong, especially in a restaurant, how to handle them. And if you don't have somebody there with experience of what to do when somebody, for example, does not show up to work, who's going to cover that shift? Or when your pizza oven breaks down, what are you going to do? There's so many things that will happen in a business that as a business owner you got to react to, and in some cases immediately, that the training will only take you so far. And if you also have to hire employees, there's another layer that brings in that you have to understand how to do it. And if you don't, it's going to basically run into problems. So I said, just give this some thought. I'm not suggesting that you do one or the other, although you got to give this some thought whether or not you want to invest, tens of thousands of dollars in a franchise fee, and the starting cost, the starting investment for this franchise, the low end in terms of getting everything set up, the build out, was about $350,000 before you actually sell your first pizza. And again, there's nothing wrong with pursuing that avenue if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, you got to decide, am I committed to do this? And that's a decision that goes beyond what is in the asset purchase agreement, that goes beyond the due diligence. The due diligence will only tell you, listen, the business, what they represented to you, the business looks okay. And you can go forward. But the business is not going to protect you from making a bad business decision. The contract is not going to protect you from making a bad business decision. once you decide to go that route, you're on your own. So the role as a business lawyer, in my role, in my opinion, is to assist you making those decisions, is to advise you about the potential consequences that go outside of the contract. Yeah, I mean, the contract is going to be legal. And I said that before. It's not about whether the contract is legal. It's whether the terms of the contracts are good for you and whether the decision you're making at this time is good for you. And that's just, it's not written in the contract. In fact, the contract says you read this, you agree with it, you understand it, you agree to all the terms, and and you had the opportunity to review it with an attorney, with an accountant, and you went with it. So I don't say went with it, but you get my point. The contract's not going to protect you from making a bad business decision, and as a business attorney, I see my role as to give you some guidance about look beyond the contract, look beyond the due diligence, understand why you're doing it, and if everything looks good, let's go with it. But give that some thought. It's a very important decision. It's very subjective. The numbers will give us a story, and but once you sign that dotted line, you give the keys to that business. It is yours. If you have any questions if you're interested in buying a business, you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at rich@richsierra.com. I might do another segment on this about selling a business, but I might expand a little bit on buying a business. But for now, I think it's good for today. Again, if you'd like to reach me at some point, you can send me via email at rich@richsierra.com. If you're interested in the legal services that we offer in our firm, our website is floridasmallbusinesslegalcenter.com. We're on Facebook at FSB Legal. This podcast is also being videoed. So you want to see the video on the podcast, it's youtube.com/@Richard Sierra. We're on Twitter, now I think it's called X. So Rich_Sierra. Instagram at FSB Legal. Our phone number is 866-842-5202. Business SOS, 8 common legal mistakes business owners make and how to avoid them. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can ask for your local bookstores. If you like the podcast, I ask you to follow us, share it with your friends, give us a review. This also is shared with other business owners through the algorithms, Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and the other podcast platforms. Until next week, this is Rich Sierra with the Florida Small Business Legal Center. Remember that my goal is to help you succeed.